Hi everybody, today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to do a simple combat AI. This is going to be done in the Construct 3 video game engine, which is a browser-based video game engine that is very powerful at making games quickly, prototypes quickly, and you can also deploy it to multiple platforms. It's a joy to work in. I've really enjoyed using it for over a year now. This simple combat AI, we're going to use a few simple features to make some enemies that are actually kind of fun to play against. We're going to use a simple mechanism, which is distance between the enemy and the player. And then we're going to combine that with a state machine. And then we're going to combine it lastly with the move to behavior in Construct 3. With those three elements as our recipe, we'll make a pretty fun game. With that said, though, I've already built the game, and let me show it to you so you have an idea of what we're going to be making. Go ahead and hit play here. And if you take a look, I've got some simple animations going on with, I've got my player that I'm controlling, and I'm playing against these bad guys. I can shoot some green fireballs, and what you can see is I've actually put a text object above each of these enemies and my player that says what state that they're in. I'm controlling my player with a simple 8-direction movement behavior, but the enemies are using move to, and the distance that we're going to be calculating plus the move to and this state machine is what's going to be all combined to make a decent combat AI. So I'll let this go ahead and knock me out. Okay, I only defeated one monster. I'll do better next time, as they all sit there and they taunt me, which was their final state that they go into after they've won the game. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump in and figure out how we're going to make this. What I've done is I've taken the finished game and I've created a shell, and that way it'll allow us to focus on the state machine as a whole. I will post this game so it can be downloaded on itch in the link below. I'll have to replace the art though with dummy art, so you'll just see some red squares probably going around the screen because I am using art from Craftpix.net. I'll have a referral link to that place down below as well. That's a fantastic place to get lots of 2D art, lots of freebies. I subscribe and you get access to the whole site. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's a nice way to have access to new art that they're constantly releasing to make fun games. So let's go over to our event sheet here to kind of ground ourselves. So if you look in here, I've already built out roughly I don't know, it'll end up probably being 70 events when we're done with this thing, maybe 75. And there's a lot of stuff in here that I left in so we wouldn't have to take the time to develop this during this video. Otherwise, this video would end up being an hour. But let's go ahead and see what the difference is. So if I hit play, what I've left is the player's state machine, which is much simpler because I'm using my controls, and he's walking, and when he stops walking, he goes to idle, and when I press spacebar, he attacks. But you notice that our enemies are pretty dumb right now. They've got their health bars above, and they're sitting there and they're in their idle state. But let's go ahead and add some combat AI to these guys, so it's a little bit more interesting. So the very first thing that you have to be aware of before we even go into the event sheet is let's look at our monster. On our monster, I've done a few things. First of all, let's go to behaviors. I've put a handful of behaviors here that we used in this game. The most important of which is move to. Move to is what we're going to use to actually have the character moving across the screen towards our guy. The next is timer. I'm using this in a few different ways, mostly so that I can have some delays after it attacks before it can attack again, and also after I get hurt so he can't move for a moment. And then I think there's one other way I used it. Solid, so that they can't run out of the boundary of my map. There's some invisible sprites that I'll quickly show you to keep them contained. And then pin, because I wanted to pin certain helper sprites to the monster, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then lastly, tween. Tween I'm using mostly just as an opacity tween, so that when they spawn, they can fade into existence rather than instantly appearing. Alright, and then the next thing you need to be aware of are these instance variables. Now, what these do is they're very helpful for managing your objects in your game. The most important instance variable that I've put on here is state. So state is what we will be using to tell the object I'm idling, or I want you to attack right now, or I want you to charge. And we're creating a simple state machine by doing so. Sometimes when you think about a state machine, you might be used to seeing the visual connections of it going from one state to a next state. And Construct 3 doesn't really have that type of, I'll say, visual scripting. It's an event sheet, but you can still create it, and I'll show you how to do that. And then these, we have distance, which we're going to have to maintain on the object, which is how far am I from the player, and I'll show you how to calculate that. And then charge X and Y. That's specifically because I don't want the character to be charging constantly towards my player. I want to be able to dodge the charge. So I have to store its X and Y location for him to charge towards. And then ID, so that I can keep track of which monsters I'm working with. And then how much health I have. So these monsters have 6 health. Let's go over to our event sheet. And let's ground ourselves before we start authoring. On the starter layout, I do a whole bunch of things to try to make sure that we're attaching the health bar as well as some text objects to say what state they're in to the player as well as to the monster. I also have a little scoring system at the top and the ability to replay the game after the game is over. I also implemented a spawning system so that after I defeat the monsters, more monsters keep appearing. I made it so that it actually spawns faster and faster and faster, just to make it a little bit more interesting. But largely, when you spawn a new monster, you have to do all that setup again. You have to attach the health bar, you have to attach the state object, and you have to attach this attack helper, which is what gets pinned to the monster. And I have that attached to the sword. I'll show you that real quick because that's maybe a little trick. Is if you look here on image point 1, I keep that on the tip of the sword, and I end up pinning my attack helper to that, so that's what determines whether or not I landed a hit or not. And then I want them to tween into existence on their opacity so that they don't just instantly appear. They fade in. Okay, so what I want to have is the very first thing you should be aware of is in order for us to have the right animation playing, which if you look at our player here, our monster, these are our animations that I've loaded in. I've got an idle, a walk, an attack, a hurt, a charge, you know, where they move faster. It's just like the walk but faster. And then a dead. And then finally, that taunt screen that I showed earlier after they defeated me. Okay, so we have to figure out, you know, how we're going to go between those different states, but I also want to visually show it as it's going between the different states. So this is what's doing that. So system every tick, monster state, which is my text object, set text to monster state. But then I also need to implement that down below. Sorry, I misspoke a little bit. This is me just updating the text object above it so that we can use it for debugging and as well as to demonstrate the state machine. Sound good? Okay, so let's go ahead and continue down. We've got our mirror control here, and really I'm using mirror, and this is a very nice feature so that you don't create graphics that are I'm facing right versus left, and I have 2 sets of graphics. In Construct 3, you just use mirror, and if I want to look left, I mirror it. If I want to look right, I don't mirror it, or vice versa, depending however your art is set up. And so you can do some simple things like if my player is to the right of the monster, make sure the monster is looking right. If the player is to the left, make sure it's looking left. And this is where now we've gotten to where we're going to author our events today. So I've created a group called Monster, and inside of here I've already set up a few local variables: charge delay, attack delay, and hurt delay. And we'll use those as we author our code. But these groups are where we're going to fill in our events. And some of them I don't even think we'll end up adding any code. But the way I like to set up my state machine is I think about the different states that the character might be in or the monster might be in. And I have a group for that. And then I also have a group for the state machine. And under the state machine are events that trigger the change in state. But underneath these individual states, I put things that might happen while you are in that state. So this is transitioning between states, and this is while you are in that state. And that's just how I like to set it up, and helps me keep myself organized. And then lastly, I have a couple buckets here like monster effects, just for like the explosion and a couple other things. And then lastly, this category, which I call dist and animation. And like I said, we're going to have to use move to plus the state machine plus our distance function to make a simple AI. So let's go ahead and start. You might see me looking over here, and that's because I do have the finished version up on my screen over here, and I'm going to use that for reference so I don't waste your time. Okay, so scrolling on down to where we're at for monster. Let's start with our dist and our animation. So we do have monstable monsters, so we need to do a system and a for each. And I want to loop through each monster that we have so that it acts on each of them. And then inside of here, I want to add a couple things. I want to go to my monster, and I want to set that instance variable of distance. And the formula for that is distance, and then you provide the x and y of what you want to calculate the distance between. So let's do player.x, player.y, monster.x, monster.y. And now we know what our distance is. As it goes through the code, it's constantly updating. And the next thing I want to do is I want to set the animation that I talked about earlier to whatever my current state is. So if we go to set animation, what I'll do here is rather than putting in a specific one, I'm actually going to put in monster.state. And what this lets us do is, so as long as we have the animation that's named the same as our state, then this will work. All right, and we're good to go. So now, whatever state I'm in, we will be animating that. So that's all good. All right, so the first thing that we want to do, now that we have distance and we have something to trigger off of to change between states, I'm going to start with charge, because that's, I think, a fun one. So what we want to implement is another for each, because we want to go through each of the monsters. And I want it to be that if I'm, oh, sorry. So this is where, once we're already in the state where we're going to put our code. But we want to go down to the state machine and start there, because I want to say what's going to trigger us to go into that state. So for the charge, what I want to do is I'm going to use, similarly, here, I'll just copy this. I want to have a for each monster. I then want to have a sub event, and I want it to check whether or not my monster dist is above a certain value. So let's go ahead and do that. Monster.dist. And let's just say if I'm greater than or equal to 600, I want the charge. Okay, so what are all the things I need to do? I need to change my state, first and foremost. So let's go to our instance variable, set value, state, and let's change that to charge. All right, now I also want to have the player to have the ability to dodge him, so I want to have him go to a specific XY, and I want it to be where the player was standing when we charged. So let's go ahead and store that variable. Monster set variable or set value, charge X, and say player.x. And then similarly, let's set the Y. So monster charge Y, player.y. And you know what? Let's see what this looks like. Oh, they're charging. That's great. But they aren't doing anything. So we've set it to charge, and the animation is showing that they're charging, but they're not moving to me. So let's go up into here, which is now I'm in that state. So what do I want to do once I'm in that state? First, let's do a check. Let's make sure that we're actually inside of that state. So let's do a blank sub event and monster. Let's compare the instance variable of state to charge. All right, I know I'm charging, so what do I want to do? I'm going to use my move to. Remember, we have distance, move to, and a state machine to make this simple combat AI. And I'm going to have it move to position, and let's move to the monster.charge X and monster.charge Y, and do it directly. We don't need any waypoints or anything. We're just going to charge right to where that player was standing. And let's do it quickly because we're charging. So that makes sense. So with move to, you can set the the max speed and a few other things. So let's do max speed. Let's set it to 700. And then let's also go ahead and copy this and set the acceleration higher so that we can get up to speed quickly to 1,000. And let's also do the deceleration at 1,000. 1,000. Great. Okay, now I also want to have something that when I arrive there, I kind of want the monster to kind of be breathing heavily and need to catch its breath a second before it can continue after the player if he missed. So let's go ahead and do a monster and on arrived event. So move to on arrived. I want the monster to actually start a timer. And this is how long I'm going to be breathing heavily after I've arrived to my event, arrived to my destination. So let's go ahead and make it the charge delay, which is a local variable I set up above. And let's also give it a little bit of randomness, minus 0.5 plus random 1. So it'll be somewhere between a half second and 1.5 seconds. And let's call this charge delay. Okay, so I've got this timer event that's going on. I've got there, I've arrived. Now what happens when that timer ends? Sounds like we're going to change states again. So let's go back to our state machine and let's do a... Actually, even before I start breathing heavily, I don't want him to still be looking like he's running, standing in place. So really what I want to do is on the arrival event, on arrived, and if it happens to be, let's add another condition, monster. I also want to check to make sure that my state is actually charging. When I arrive there, I want to change it to idle. So let's go to monster, let's go to set value, and change our state to idle. Okay, let's see what this looks like. So hopefully now they'll charge at us, and then they'll idle and kind of breathe heavy for a second. Okay, they're idle. Oh, now they're charging again. Now, you'll notice, though, that if I stay within a certain distance, they're just standing there, and that's kind of boring. So I want them to have to actually charge after me, or follow after me if I'm within a certain distance. So let's go ahead and implement that now. And that's going to be our walk animation. So let's go to our state machine. And similar to how we did the 600, I'm going to copy and paste this. And I'm going to say, if the monster dist is less than 600, but then also greater than 200, I want to change this to walk. Okay, seems simple enough. And I also want to make sure that I'm not already doing a couple things. So let's check a few things. Compare instance variable. Let's make sure that the state is not already walking. Let's invert it. And let's also make sure that we're not actively charging, because we don't want to charge and then all of a sudden start walking as we get close. And let's also make sure that our timer is not running, so that they have to sit there and they have to wait. So we added that timer. Let's call it monster timer is timer running, and we called it charge delay. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. It's going to change it to walk. Actually, let's do one more thing. It's going to change it to walk, but he won't do anything. So let's go up here, and in our section that we have for walk, let's put some move to controls. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of copy this as a way to save a little bit of time. And I'm going to say for each monster, let's put it underneath here. For each monster, and if the state is walk, I want to move to not where I stored that charge X, but I want to move it to the player.x. So now I'm just going to constantly chase after this guy. No matter where he is, I'm going for him. But I don't want to do it as fast. So let's do it 200, and let's set these for 400. And I think this would be a good way. Let's start here. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so now they're charging at me, and now they're walking. Hold on. They charge. Okay, so they're not Interesting. Okay, so I didn't see the idle event, so we must have done something a little bit goofy there. Oh, so I have is the charge delay running. That's funny. I actually need to invert this, so I want to make sure that it's not running. And now you should see the idle event. So they come, they charge, they idle, and then they charge again, they idle. Let's just say I'm closer though, they'll start walking. Okay, that's all working. Let's keep going. But now we need to make sure that the monster actually attacks us when they get within a certain distance. So we've done the 600, 200. Let's just copy this again. And let's make it, if you are less than 200, aka you're right next to me. And let's just say I'm not already attacking. And my charge delay isn't running. Actually, I'm okay with charge delay running. If they get close enough to me, I want them to attack me. So let's just change this to attack. Oh, and you know what? Up here, this charge, we don't need that. Not on the walk. We only need that when we're charging. That makes sense. And when I set it to attack, I need to do a few things underneath attack. So let's kind of come up here and see what this looks like. Monster attack. Okay, so let's do a couple things. First, let's copy this. Let's paste it here. For each monster, if the state is attack, I want to stop moving, so I have to kind of stand in place while I attack. So let's do move to stop. Let's delete this. And then what I want to have happen is on the animation attack, when it's finished, I want it to have an attack delay. So let's have monster and on animation finished. On the attack animation is being finished. And let's also just make sure that our state is attack. Let's have monster, start timer, and let's call this our attack delay. And let's also call it that, attack delay. We can make this a little random, I guess. Minus 0.5 plus random 1. Okay. It's all good. Now, it's not inflicting any damage yet. Now, really, inside the monster, it's just responsible for swinging. The player getting struck by the sword is actually in the player state machine. And I'll show you real quickly where that is. I have it, that attack helper that we've attached to the sword. Basically, if the monster's attack animation is playing, and I have it if it's greater than the animation frame 7, because that's when he starts to actually swing it. The first 6 frames are him bringing it back. Then I want him, if it's overlapping, to trigger the player to go into that hurt. So for us, we've done our job to swing the sword inside the monster state machine. Similarly, though, in the monster machine, we will have to show how to respond when he gets attacked by the player. But let's go ahead and see what this looks like. So hopefully he charges and attacks. Boom. And you see the player state machine is working. Okay, so now what we want to do is we need to respond to if we're getting hit. If we're getting attacked, we need to make sure that we're triggering our hurt state. So let's go to our state machine and let's do a couple things. Yep, okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a monster and we're going to do an on collision. And we're going to pick our green fireball thing that our player can throw. And I want to then also add a blank sub event. I want to check that the monster's state isn't already hurt. So if you're hurt, you aren't going to get hurt, again necessarily in this game at least. So let's go to compare instance variable. Let's go to state and hurt. And let's do not equal. Okay. What we will then do is we will set the state to hurt. And there's a few other things that we want to do. If the monster gets hit, I want him to stop moving. So move to stop. And I also want to trigger my hurt delay. And some of this you might put up higher, but I'm just going to bury it into the state machine rather than putting it into that other subgroup because I've already triggered my events where I want to do this. So let's come in here and start a timer. And let's call it, let's use our hurt delay variable. And let's call it hurt delay. And then there's a few other things I want to do. I want to add some effects. So let's do system, create, object. Let's make it explode. Let's use explode. And I want to do that on the effects layer. And let's do it at the projectile.x and projectile.y. Okay? And then I've done my job. The projectile now should be destroyed. So it can only hit one enemy. And then also, this is another thing that we have to do. We have to lower the HP of the monster. So let's go to set instance variable, set value, sorry, HP. We can do, we can set it to self.hp -1. That'll work. Now, when I do this, what happens is there's already a state machine, or sorry, a set of code up top where it will actually take our HP value into consideration, and it will set the, maybe there isn't score replay, spawn control, save status. I might need to create that still. What I want to have happen is after the HP gets lowered, it needs to show the health bar getting lower. That's all. All right, so, oh, we'll do that right now. So let's go ahead and add a blank sub event. So let's pull that up. The HP monster bar, we're gonna say is the compare instance variable, is the monster ID equal to monster ID, because there's a bunch of these floating around in the game potentially. We want to make sure we're talking to the right one. And we're gonna say HP monster, I want you to set the animation frame to monster.hp. And the way I have this set up, if you look at our artwork here, is I just have it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So at 6 health, you're full. At 5 health, you have 5. And this is a simple trick to use for HP. You can do a whole bunch of other stuff with progress bars and tweening and lerps and other cool things to make it a smooth effect. But we're just going to use our artwork that we have here. And then let's also have the opacity, because I have it kind of faded to an opacity of 10. I want when I get hit for it to actually pop up to 100. And I also only want it to be shown for a certain period. So let's set a timer. Start timer. And we'll do it once. We'll call it visible for 1 second. Okay, that'll work. And then I also need to have another sub event that checks if my monster's died. So if my monster's HP is less than 0, so let's compare instance variable. If it is, sorry, less than, if HP is less than or equal to 0, I want to set the state to dead. So monster set value state to dead. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. It's charging me. Oh, got one of them. Uh-oh. They got me. I gotta escape. And, oh. Oh. Okay, so it's attacking one of them and it's working. But one of the things I want to do is have it so that the explosion also hurts them, because I think that that is a more enjoyable experience, so that you can hit more than one person at a time. Let's see how I implemented this previously. So basically all I did is I'm going to take the same block of code and I'm going to paste it again. And I'm going to say on collision with explode this time. And if I'm not already hurt, I want to set the state to hurt. I still want to stop my move to. I still want to start my hurt delay timer. I don't want to create another explosion. It's not going to be like a chain reaction. I don't need to destroy that. And I still want to reduce my HP. So I believe then that all still works. So now let's just test that real quick. And now I should hit more than one person when they charge me. Yep. Just briefly, that person got hit. Boom. I hit both of them. Oh. Uh-oh. They got me. Okay. So, let's keep going. I want to have some, I need to deal with the monster effects a little bit. So I have this monster effects block. Let's go ahead and make sure that we don't just keep creating these explode objects, that they just sit there forever. So what I want to have is explode. I'm going to do on finished, and the animation inside there is called explode. I want to destroy it. So let's do destroy. And then lastly, let's also use that timer that we created for how long we want it to be visible. So let's do is timer running visible. This is for the HP bar. I want to set it back to a lower opacity, and let's fade it. So let's use this, and let's use the tween event, tween one property. Let's call it opacity. Let's tween the opacity, the end value down to 10. Let's do it in 1 second. Okay, I think that that's pretty good. Now, looking up through here, let's see what we've got all going. I think that we're pretty much done. We might have a few things that might be some quirks that we have to work out, but I think that we've accomplished what we wanted to here. Oh, I didn't handle the dead animation. If I die, which I just got defeated last time. Okay, so me attacking them, what happened there? Okay. It wasn't triggering their hurt animation, interestingly enough. So what was going on? So on collision with this, I want to set my state to hurt. Do I need to be doing something while I'm hurt? No. Move to... this is why. So we have that hurt delay running, but we're not using it with anything. So I need to make sure that in my state machine that if I'm hurt, I can't do certain things. So let's take this and copy it. And let's say if my hurt delay is running, I can't charge. I can't do my move to. And I can't do, sorry, my move to, that's this. I don't want to charge. I don't want to have my move to, and I don't want to be able to attack if I have my hurt delay on. And similarly, I should probably have my attack delay also there. So after I attack, I can't attack again if my attack delay is running, which I think we implemented during attack. Yep, attack delay. And then lastly, up here, we have hurt delay, and let's also have our charge delay. You can't charge right away again. Okay, and now I think it's a little bit more realistic. The last thing, though, we do need to implement is if we do hit the dead state, we need to show our monster dying. So let's do that. Let's go to... Where is that state? Sorry, I'm looking at my other game that's complete, so I don't waste your time. Attack, walk, idle. Must have implemented it. Set to dead. Here it is. I just had it down below. You know what? We'll put it inside the state machine. I didn't have a section for it. You know what? No, let's just create the section. We'll repurpose this. Let's call this monster dead, since we're not using idle for anything. And let's come in here and do for each monster. Let's copy this. Let's paste. For each monster, that's right. If it's dead, I want to do a couple things. I want to set my animation to dead. All right, so let's do that. Oh no, it's already setting my animation to dead. We're good because we did that up above. See, this is the fun though. You kind of get into these things and they do get complicated really quick. So it's important to have an environment where you're able to test quickly. So I really don't even need this because my animation is already being triggered off of here. Once I set it to dead, it's going to dead. Really though, all I need to do is if once it's dead, if that animation finishes, they should really be destroyed. So if the state is dead, and I don't want to do it here, and I don't want to do it for the, because it's a trigger event. Let's do monster, unfinished, dead. Oh, deet, dead. We want our monster to be destroyed. Okay, we don't need any of that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we created. All right. Seems to be working. I gotta time it right. Boom. Oh, missed it. I should allow them to be hurt, but that would maybe be a little bit up. Too easy. Okay, I gotta kite them. Okay, I got a couple guys down. Uh-oh, did it too soon. They were invincible still. Okay, I got 3 down. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and let them take me out. So, anyways, guys, that is our game. We've implemented a simple combat AI. It involved distance as a way to trigger which state we're going to go in between. It involved move to behavior in Construct 3. And it involved the use of a state machine. And we used the instance variable on the objects to handle that state. So hopefully that taught you guys something. Hopefully it was useful for you guys. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't. I have very few subscribers right now, but this is just fun for me, and it'll make my day if you do subscribe. Lastly, highly encourage you to check out Construct 3 if you haven't. It's a great video game engine to learn how to make games in. I've been really enjoying it for over a year now. And with that, thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.